they both kind of came at the same time, art and
Okay.
music. They always have felt like sort of two sides of
Yep.
my coin.
Yep.
And with art, when I was younger, I was expressing myself, but I don't think I realized the importance of what I was doing. I wish I could do this, writing music for film, writing music in general. I wish I could do that as my job. The thing that annoys me is that people did mystify it and be like, we don't know how anyone does this. Oh, it's impossible. A lot of learning to go easy on myself, which has
Hmm.
become natural to me. I
Me neither.
I had to quit working for people in places that were toxic, that were
Hmm.
um, being taking advantage, not paying well, just being outright mean and trying to bring me down so that there's less competition in the
Oh,
world.
Hi there, I'm April Paige, breaking down the what, when, where, and how creatives get their inspiration. I'm a big fan of the cursey words, and I've been a creative for 30 plus years in marketing and fine art. This is where creatives unite to break down the facts of creative life. Buckle up, let's get lost in the world of creativity together.
So, welcome everyone to Artist Antics with April, where we talk to creatives about creativity. And today I am very excited to sit down and talk to fine artist and composer Jeff Johnson. And Jeff resides in LA, originally from South Carolina. He was a child art prodigy at the age of 11, painting commissions at 12, a gallery showing at 13, and attended a prestigious art school at 14. Equally matched in his organ and musical composition skills, he's landed him a spot at the University of South Carolina, where he studied music for 4 years and completed a postgraduate degree in music composition at UCLA. And now he composes TV and music tunes. I don't know what else to call it in LA. And then, due to a chronic illness and chronic pain, he has come through. And after many years of unsuccessful treatments in 2020, he finally received the right help and now is back to creating and paints an impressionist style with bold, vivid colors. He seeks to express his sense of wonder through a new lens of hope and future redemption for the world. So, welcome, Jeff. And
Yeah.
I am so honored that you're here today to speak with me. And I just love your comeback story. Before we talk about creativity, I just wanted to touch base for those watching and just get your thoughts about how important it is to be your own health advocate, and then we'll talk about creativity.
Yes, of course. It's so important. I think I it was a struggle for me to learn how to advocate for myself. But first I had to realize internally I matter, I'm important. I had to sort of learn to love myself because
Ooh,
of that,
yeah.
and learn that I am worth taking care of. And it's like before I could actually take care of myself, I had to be in that place mentally where I loved myself enough to start taking care of myself. And so I feel like,
I'm learning that lesson right now, my friend.
yeah, I don't know why I I don't know why I thought I couldn't love myself. Like I don't know where that came from to begin with.
Yes.
And I don't know why loving ourselves has to be so hard. And
Yeah.
maybe for some people it's not, but for me, I'm like I've always been super critical of myself, like a very condemning inner conscience. And like I've had to just gently go to work on that for the past 4 or 5 years or so.
It does take some work. I am going through that work myself. I don't know why, to your point, it is so hard for us to do that to ourselves. I mean, I know I judge myself and I'm my harshest critic.
Mm,
But yet with other people, I'm overgiving and want to really be an enabler in some cases. So I'm learning that about myself too. So there's got to be some kind of balance and learning to love yourself and making you priority because nobody else is going to. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and you're the cheerleader of your own life and you have to, and whether it's health or whatever it is, creativity, all the things in life that you're trying to succeed in, you really have to make yourself the priority. And I think we're just taught that it's selfish in a way, and really it's not. There are words that I won't mention because it's overused, but um I think that there's a fine line there between loving yourself, knowing your boundaries, and holding those boundaries and what's good for you, even though it might not be good for the other person, and having those awkward moments and just letting them sit there and be okay with it. And it's hard. We're not taught that. We're taught to fix everything and make everybody feel okay. And especially as women, for me, I'm overly do that from learning from the women in my family, but I'm trying to break that. So thank you for bringing that up. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really important point. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Well, I was gonna say I feel like I've spent a lot of my life as sort of a chronic people pleaser. And um a few years ago, yeah, I was talking to my therapist about it, and he was anytime he would tell me that like I have to care for myself first in order to have a self to care for other people. And
Amen.
but it always felt so scandalous to hear that for some reason, that I have to care for myself first. I have to be my own self, be a person in order to care for other people.
That's right.
And
So it's just like the airplane scenario where you put your own mask on first.
yeah, yeah,
And if
just like
you fill your own cup, so to speak, then you have the possibility to help other people when and if you decide that's what you want to do.
yeah,
Um, but
I
if
would say
you're
basically the
completely draining it all the time,
yeah,
then you don't have it to give, and that's when that burnout comes, or you spin out of control because of something silly and nobody realizes it's from the 50 things that happened to you prior to that, so
yeah.
stuff like that.
To the airplane analogy, I think I used to be the type of person who would put everyone's masks on, help everyone get everyone's masks on. Then once the plane is all good, then I can do it myself at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And that leaves you totally depleted. So,
Yeah.
and could be, I'm no doctor or a psychologist, but it could be maybe coming out in health issues. I don't know.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So very good. Wow, I didn't expect that. That was great. So let's dive into the creativity of it all, shall we? So I know a little bit about your story from you being a young prodigy, but I guess, you know, me being an artist as well, I you might find this funny, but my family was actually concerned about me because as a young child, I would lock myself in my room and draw and paint and didn't want to talk to a soul all day long. And they forced me to go outside and go play. And total introvert, no one would know that now. But as a child, I guess I want to go that far back, unless wherever you want to start. I just interested about what started your love of creating art, and where did that come from? Where do you think it
Mm.
came from? Philosophically, spiritually, however you go with it. Was it a family member, or somebody who turned you on to it? Like what does that look like, you getting started in loving art?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go way back, all the way to kindergarten, because I remember in kindergarten the for this is for music specifically, but it also applies to art. I remember the teacher would play the Nutcracker recordings during class.
Hmm.
I remember there was one time where I started conducting the class to the Nutcracker, and it looked completely silly, but then everyone started doing it too, and so the whole class ends up conducting with their hands. But I would just I would feel the music. I would just feel so much excitement um, hearing that. And with art, I just it was actually the same time in kindergarten. It's just the freedom of putting paint onto, well, at that time, paper, really cheap
Mm,
paint onto really cheap paper. Um, there was just such a freedom in that, such a creative charge that came out of it. And then
absolutely.
I would always break the rules and I would paint on both sides of the paper, and then I'd get in trouble because I'd go put it out in the hallway and it would get all over the floor. And
Right.
like I've just never really followed the rules completely, and it caused me a
We're
lot of
kindred
frustration.
souls. We're
And
kindred art souls because I used to color outside the lines. I would do all
yeah,
this crazy stuff, and people are like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Isn't this fun?"
yeah, no,
And
it is.
people thought I was crazy. So I can totally relate with that, and it is a flow and a feeling that you don't get from anything else when you're in that creative state. I call it the zone, just like athletes do with, they're in the zone of their performance, and
Yeah.
it's another space. It's almost meditative where you're letting things come through you, and you're not your logical mind isn't stopping that from happening, and you're putting it to the side and just letting come out whatever comes out. So it's very much a childlike experience, even though we're grown-ups. And I get lost in that creative state sometimes till 2 in the morning, and I'm like, oh god, I gotta go to bed now. So
I do too. Actually, when you were describing um, your early years locking yourself in your room, I was thinking, man, that sounds so nice. Actually, locking myself
right.
in the room,
I
and
used to get so upset because 'cause they'd make me go out and play with other kids, and I'm like, "I don't want to." And they're
but
like,
it was hard
"No, you
too.
should go out and play with other children," and I'm like, "No, but I wanna do this." I was like, "Why can't I do this?" I would cry, it was terrible. Anyway.
Yeah, and even when I would be out playing with people, with kids, I'd be thinking very artsy thoughts while throwing the football or whatever, like, "Oh,
That's
this
right.
grass just looks so beautiful that we're standing on right now." And
That's
then you
right.
get hit in the head with a football because 'cause you're thinking about the trees and the grass.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, as that, young kid being jazzed about the creative state, you went, obviously, we're doing very well. I mean, you're doing better than I am as an adult artist, with everything you've done. Just curious, like, when did the music part of it come in? Was it a part of the, whole thing of art and music coming in together for you at the same time? Was it separate? Were you led to music from someone in your family? What did that look like?
I was led to music from, uh, well, first to your question, they both kinda came at the same time, art and
Okay.
music. They always have felt like sort of 2 sides of
Yep.
my coin,
Yep.
and, um, yeah, my parents put me in art lessons from an early age, and I did that all through high school, and then I sort of quit art and just pursued music, because with art, when I was younger, I was expressing myself, but I don't think I realized the importance of what I was doing. I hadn't sort of accepted that part of myself. I was very shy about it and sort of sometimes even ashamed, which I don't like to say that
Yeah.
now. But I don't know. It felt like something that I wasn't allowed to do as an adult anymore because it's like
Mm,
this childlike thing,
yeah.
which now I'm like, well, that's why I should do it as an adult. Actually, it's because
Yeah.
it's it's childlike and it's awesome, and the
That's
world
right.
needs
All
that.
adults should have child play in their life. Side note, but keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but I lost my train of thought. But for music, it was just hearing the film scores and movies. I remember watching Jurassic Park as a kid and thinking, I want to learn piano so I can learn how to play that theme song on piano. And then it took like 5 years or probably more than that actually, of learning piano to play the actual sheet music, because the sheet music for the theme is actually really hard if you're playing the original version. And
Hmm.
so it took forever to get to that point, but I was like, I'm going to keep learning piano until I can play this. And then like a decade later, I finally played it, and it was amazing. And then I just kept doing it, and I was like, I wish I could do this, writing music for film, writing music in general. I wish I could do that as my job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then look at you. You made it happen. So what did that look like? Like how did you go from, your music degree to actually writing music, what, and share with us what you feel comfortable with, but how did that happen? How did that transition happen? Cuz I really want our audience to know like that it's not as hard or as secretive as they think. It's possible and there are steps. So yeah, I'd love to hear
Yeah.
that.
The thing that annoys me is that people did mystify it and be like, we don't know how anyone does this. Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah.
But it really just was about being in the right place, which was LA, being near the studio system, which now that so much is done online, it's different now. It's
Yep.
You can network online now, but um, I I basically just I went to the UCLA program in order to get to know classmates and teachers there, and also get practice recording with the studio orchestra. And just with those connections, you start getting little jobs here and there. And
Yep.
then usually with composers, uh, working as an assistant for an already established composer is a good idea. So I did that for two different composers, and that's sort of just how I rolled into
Yep.
that line of work.
Yeah, no, that's great. I did something similar with a professor from art school who I was helping him do underpaintings for murals outside of school, and kind of cut my teeth on that. And I would do all the underpaintings and, burnt umber, and he would come back and put all the color in and change what he wanted to change. But I was doing the like hard work and he would come back and give it his style. But and then I realized I don't want to do murals because it's so labor intensive. But
Yeah,
it was
they're
part of
huge.
me, my learning experience, and
Yeah,
learning from him, how not just to make things faster and easier, but also the business side of things, and how to make all that happen. So yeah, so that's great.
yeah. The business side was the probably the most one of the most important parts of doing the actual apprenticeship, because they don't really teach that in school. I don't know
Mhm.
why, but I mean, they try. They do like one music business class, but
Yeah.
but the yeah, but also for something like that, being in a classroom just isn't going to teach you the ins and outs of it like just doing it in person. I don't
That's
know.
right.
I've always done badly learning in classroom settings anyways,
Yeah.
and it's like I have to do something in order to actually learn it. I forget what there's visual learning,
Yeah.
I forget the name of that type of learning, but
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. You have to be actually doing it for it to stick.
yeah, and I have to make mistakes too. Like
Yeah,
mistakes are such an important part of it.
right. Well, you have to have the freedom to allow yourself to make mistakes. I think that's
Yeah.
all it is with creation. A lot of the other people that I've interviewed for the channel, we've talked about that too, where you have imposter syndrome and you think everything has to be perfect right out the gate, and it
Mhm.
doesn't leave room for anything to kind of seed and grow into something you didn't expect because you're cutting it off right away. And
Yeah.
a award-winning musician and songwriter that I had on here. He was talking about Tony St. Tone for anybody who wants to go look at it. He was talking about that same thing where, something came to him and it just floated by into his head, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to write a song about trees. And I was and he's like, trees, who wants to write a song about trees, and nobody wants to hear that. And he was, his internal fight was real, and he stopped himself from doing that, and actually became, a really great song. And sometimes those songs that start out as something about trees turn into what he said was about spirituality. It had nothing to do with trees, so he didn't know that's where it was going, but if he had cut it off, he wouldn't have allowed himself to go there. So I'm
Yeah.
curious for you, like either music or art, or pick one, or one at a time, however you want to do it. um how does the creation thought come to you? Because in the past, and it's been similar for almost any artist I've talked to, any medium, that when they get that inspiration, they want to capture that thought so that they can expand upon it. And it just, it's almost like flowing through, channeled, comes from, outer space, like a cloud floating by, and you catch it because you happen to be, in that space where you can receive it at that moment. So I'm just curious, like, is that your process, or do you have a different process when things come to you for inspiration? What does that look like from the beginning? And then how does that translate? What are the many steps to the end cut of all that?
Mm. Oh, such a good question. There's so much to say about that
Yeah.
too. In a broad sense, the creative process, it does feel like sort of the outer space metaphor that you used. It also feels like sort of like there's a river of ideas, and
Yes.
they're from God, like this river of just goodness and truth and beauty and ideas and like
That's right.
new things for the world. It's like flowing above our heads. And then when we sit down to work at the easel or at the desk, it's like we're putting our head up into that river and receiving it, and
Yes. That's right.
letting letting those ideas come through us. Um, for music, like I'm thinking about a project that I'm finishing up right now. It's an anime type project where I'm writing the score for it, and a lot of the music that I'm being asked to written is outside of my comfort zone. It's not what I'm used to. It's not what I'm used to doing. It's a different stylistically from what I usually do. Um, and so like I have to listen to a lot of music that's in that style, but it still has to come from me. It has to be genuine. It has to come from my heart, or else it's not going to sound good. It's just going to
Yep.
be a replica of what's already there. Um, so it's like I have to absorb that music and then think about my own life, my own hardships and triumphs, and then write
Ooh.
from that place of vulnerability. And I can't be judgmental towards myself in the process. I have to say to myself, this is going to sound like shit, and I'm okay with that. Or crap, if you want to use that word instead.
Yeah, no, we love the cursey words on this channel. Feel free.
Um, but it's like I have to be okay with it being terrible, or else it can't be good. It's really weird. The perfectionist part has to just be completely out of there, which is really hard. Like,
It
that's
really is,
so
but
hard.
I can relate with what you're saying, because when I do sometimes, which I try not to do anymore, but every once in a while I'm working on one now, is a custom art piece. And they want me to take it in and put my stamp on it,
Mm,
even though they're requesting certain things. And it's very hard for me because, like you, it's outside of my comfort zone, and I really am having a hard time um, relating with it in a way, and trying to force myself to relate with it is a term I guess I will use. But and I want it to be from me, just like what you're saying. But then I don't know if you have I have this push-pull thing where I'm like, okay, but it can't be too cartoony or too, like clip art esque. It's got to be something that means something. It doesn't have to be a Rembrandt or anything, but it does have to have some value, or bring something out that they wanted to convey in this piece. And I struggle with that, because when I'm doing it for myself, it's easy because it's coming out. I have an idea. I start with a general idea. Sometimes it takes a hard left and I'm like, okay, didn't know it was going to go there. And you have to be able to follow those strings or streams, whatever you want to call it, to go with the flow. And part of it is you have to know technique. And then part of it is you have to also be open enough to follow where it's going. So it's a really sharp edge, a razor's edge there, that I think we're all trying to get to, is where the creativity is flowing. And also you have the technique side, so you know where to go with it, because you could have all the best ideas in the world, and if you don't have the technique down, then it's not going to look so great. So there's
Yes.
that too, or here, sounds so great. However
Yeah.
you want to put it. I
Kind of
don't
feels
know.
like technique can fill in the gaps where we, you were talking about how that particular painting was outside of your wheelhouse.
Yep,
And, um,
very far.
yeah,
Like
it feels like
never in a million years.
yeah, it feels like technique can sort of take us to that place where our own personal experience or emotions can't. Like I've had to do commissions where the subject matter wasn't something that I was familiar with or had life experience in, and so it's like I have to pretend, like, take my own experiences and be okay that I fall short from
Mm,
experiences that I'm trying to convey in this painting. But like, for example, I had to do a portrait of a mother, and I'm not a mother, and it like that was the theme of the painting and of the background and just of every aspect of it was motherhood. And like I had to just approach it from my own experiences with the women in my life, with my own mother.
mm.
Be okay that I don't know what that feels like to be in that position, but I, yeah, I,
You can imagine, but
yeah,
yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, it's difficult, especially you know, I it's like a boxing match, when you're on the canvas, and I think that that comes through if you're, conflicted. So you have to resolve it somehow so that
yeah,
it can come through. But I'm getting there. Done lots of sketches and lots of trials to make sure that I'm on the right track, but yeah, I'm still not comfortable.
yeah.
But
How do you get to that resolution though?
how do I get to that resolution? I just keep
Yeah.
with the client, I just keep going until they say, "Oh, I like that. Let's do that." And I'll do several sample boards is what I call them, like just the small little boards that you can do. I don't paint. I usually just sketch first and then get to composition and you know, a, a perspective that they like. And then from there, I'll still start doing color. And then I'll go from there from a second, okay, are we good with this color and this design? Yes. Okay. Then I move to the painting. And then that's how I do it in those three steps. But I'm still in the initial stage. I'm not happy with anything right now. Still working on it. I need to be happy with it too. That's kind of the thing. It's like, somebody has their own vision. How do you put your name on it if you're not happy with it at all, and they love it. I was just like, oh my God, how do I make us both happy? It's
Yeah.
it's the struggle is real. I don't know if you've experienced that with composition or art, but I'm sure with music too. I mean, that's very relative to whoever's listening to it. So,
Yeah, and like people hear things differently. Like some of the pieces I've been working on recently are very jazz based piece.
mm,
And I don't have a jazz background. I was never in jazz. I was always in marching band and like doing everything except jazz. And it seemed
yeah,
like everyone else was learning jazz and I wasn't. And so I'm trying to learn jazz now on the job. Um, and so the concern is always, well, does it sound jazzy enough when I send it off?
yeah,
And usually the answer is no, but it's like it's
yeah.
like if they can still be happy with it sounding jazzy enough, but still sounding like me, then yeah, I'm just relieved when they like it.
Yeah. Yes, me too. Because I finally feel like, okay, we can move on now, you know?
Yeah,
So, yeah, I've been doing a lot of tweaking for this project, but,
that's
yeah.
part I was gonna say too with the like the it's when learning a new style, like my temptation is to put so much pressure on myself to make this perfect, which is always my struggle, and that butts in on the curiosity piece of like I'm learning a new style. This should be a childlike sense of discovery and learning, but instead there's all this pressure. You got to get it right. You got to get it right for the client, and
And what
but
is right? Right is really
yeah, what is
relative.
right?
Yes, it really is, and I fight with that in my mind too, because it's like I was saying before, when you start a piece, a blank canvas, is the most daunting thing in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and if you are able to leave room for the magic to happen, that's
Mm,
when the cool things start happening. But and my professor in art school taught me this lesson oh so very well because I was in that perfection mode. I was like, has to be perfect. And I was painting this cow with the fence and the animals in the background. And it was a close up of you can even see the skin on his nose, like it was a perfect cow. And I was so proud of this cow. I was like, look at what I did. And he came in with my paintbrush and just went all over it. And I go, he goes, he goes, April, you are trying to perfect every little stroke. That's not what this is about. You need to let go. And I was like, I don't even know what you mean. At the time, I was so young and, new at it. I had no idea what he meant. All I knew is I just spent hours on this painting and he destroyed it. And he was trying to teach me a lesson, that I'm too invested in the perfection of it all that if I wasn't invested in all of that, that he could come through and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And, I could redo it and make it something else. So, and he challenged me in that moment. He said, do something else with it. What are you going to do now? And I was like, I don't know. You just ruined
mm.
my painting. It's so he was trying to push me, which now I understand, but at the time I was very upset. But yeah, so you have to leave room for what I call the magic to happen. The things that you can't plan for that
Totally.
happen just from making a stroke a different way or putting a different sound in a song that you might not have worked with before or something fell in the painting and you're like, that's interesting. And you pull it
Yeah.
off and you're like, okay, what are we going to do with that? So it,
Yeah, usually it's the mistake or the thing that the crazy idea that you have in the middle of the process that you're like, this is really weird and out of left field and this probably won't work. Let's do it anyways. And then
yes,
that usually ends up being the thing that turns it around or
yes.
propels you to the end of the project or propels it in a new direction that's even better.
I think that's the exciting part of the
Yes.
creation.
Oh, I
Like
love
that's
when that
the most exciting part of creating anything is that moment where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought of that or I didn't see that or check this out. And people are like, what are you talking about? You know? And look what I'm using. And I use cat toys and weird shit to put paint on them. You know, I have a whole box of weird things from kitchen utensils to car gadgets and dog
Oh,
and
nice.
cat toys and stuff that, you know, nobody would in their right mind use to paint a painting. And they put the coolest things on the actual canvas. And if you don't play around, you won't know what they can do. You have to just keep exploring, you know, for I don't know what your process is daily, but for anybody who's a creative, I think, you know, whether it's a sketchbook or you're doing you know, something, humming a tune into your recorder on your phone, like I don't know if you do a daily practice, but I think it's important to keep cultivating that time of creation.
Yes. I yes, my one of the daily practices I have is that I go to the coffee shop in the morning and get an iced coffee and then walk around the neighborhood humming stuff into my phone, humming
Oh,
tunes,
great.
and usually I don't think they're that great, and most of them aren't that great, but I end up using a lot of them in different projects. So, but the freedom of walking around with a drink in hand, like that promotes the feeling of play to me, where I can just come up with ideas.
Yes, and also to that point, I think, you know, when your body and mind have something else to focus on, like you're actually walking or drinking, then it kind of takes the logistical part of your brain over, and you're like,
Does.
okay, your creative can come through and not be hindered. Because if you didn't have those distractions, I think it's harder to sit down and be like, okay, create something now. You know, if you're doing it on a regular basis, it's like a muscle, like any muscle that, you know, it's easier and easier. And I
Yeah.
find it in weird times that stuff comes to me. And I have a whole notebook of, you know, ideas for collections that I'll never get to in my lifetime, you know, and those things come just from, like you were saying, movie, music, going out, seeing something, someone saying something, you know, something happening, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to capture that thought, you know, and um I think it's real important that on daily basis you keep cultivating that so you have it to tap into when you need it. Because if you
Mhm.
don't do it regularly, just like with anything else, it's not going to work so well. It's going to be a
Yeah.
little clunky, especially in the beginning. You know, I tell everybody to take a notebook. It doesn't even have to be a sketchbook that's more expensive. It can be any kind of paper. You know, even the kids' craft paper. It doesn't have to be expensive, and just start creating things and drawing things and doing things and see what comes out, you know, just a whole either a month or whatever time frame of creating every day should prompt you to start. Eventually the tap will start flowing, you know, you might get a drip here and there, and then finally a little trickle, and then, you know,
Mhm.
things will start to come, and you'll get really excited about getting up in the morning about what's in your head and what you want to do. That's the
Yeah.
part where I knew I was at that tipping point where I was very much, you know, had my art business going in Tampa when I used to live in Tampa, and was working with stagers and interior designers and doing all the art shows and et cetera, everything around that. And, you know, just with like any business, you have to get to a point where you push, you push, you push. I call it pushing the boulder up the hill, and you get to a tipping point where you don't have to prospect as hard because people know you now and people
Mhm.
are coming to you a little bit. And, you know, you can take a breath and have that moment where, okay, now I can have some fun and try things I haven't tried before with some of my time. And that's when I knew I was, like, in the right spot. It was when that happened and I had that feeling, and I got up and I was like, "I can't wait to get to the canvas today."
Mm.
And I knew I had never had that feeling before. And I knew that I wanted to keep that going. I was like, how do I keep this going? Because this is fantastic. Like, what amazing thing if I could live my life like this, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that power of creation, but making the time for it and then building your business, you have to have business sense to get it to that tipping point of, being able to manage it without taking every, piece of energy that you have to keep it moving forward. I don't know if that's your
Yeah.
experience, but that was mine.
Well, yeah. For me, I have to think about the business part as like part of the art itself, or otherwise it feels too, I guess, too discouraging for me. Like I have to think about my life and the creative practice as a whole as like one piece of art, and the business part is like one of the techniques used in this painting called my life.
Okay.
Yeah, like I
That's a
have
great way
to
to put it.
I have to think about it that way, or else the
Yeah.
business part feels too cumbersome. It feels
Yeah.
too overwhelming.
Yeah, and I happen to have a marketing degree and have the marketing side,
Mm.
of running, advertising and promotion. So I know all about that from a, enterprise level. So, working that both sides is fairly easy for me since that's where my corporate experience is in. But
Mhm.
there are people out there that can do all that for you for our audience. I know you know that, but for our audience, there are definitely, especially now, there are so many people that you can hire. You can hire a virtual assistant now and go on Fiverr and get a social media person for little to no money, so it's a lot easier. uh the entry is a lot easier than it used to be, and running a business like that, I think. I mean, you still have to have a little bit of business sense, at least some common sense in that
Yeah.
manner. And there's lots of copyright things you have to learn, and all of that. um and then so uh, I would like to, for my next question, ask you about, after your health crisis and your recovery and your transitioning to back to full-time professional life, um, or at least some kind of professional life now. Um, what did that look like jumping back in for anybody who has had
Mm.
to stop things and for whatever reason, and have to build them up again? I'd love to hear about that, and the audience to hear, like, how did you get back to it? What was the struggle? How did you jump back in?
Yeah, a lot of learning to go easy on myself, which has
Hmm.
never come natural to me. I
Me neither. I pound
um,
myself into the ground until, midnight and then do it all over again. But go ahead.
yeah, yeah, it's starting everything starts from, like, where I am internally in order to do things outwardly, and so, like, having to learn to love myself deep down, like we talked about at the beginning, and be in a place mentally where I'm like, I care about myself, I matter. And so everything I do now is going to be based out of that place of security deep down in my heart. And um sorry, what was the question? I got lost thinking
Just
about that part.
where you went after your recovery, because you had to stop everything for a while. I assume you stopped everything. Maybe that's a wrong assumption, but when you came back to it all, like, there are some people that are gonna listen to us that say, "How did he get back into it? What did that look like? Did you have to start from scratch? What were the struggles there?"
Yeah, well, so basically part of I had to quit a lot of stuff. Like, I had to quit working for certain people in the entertainment world. I had to quit working for people in places that were toxic, that were
Mm.
um, being taking advantage, not paying well, just being outright mean, and trying to bring me down so that there's less competition in the
Oh,
world. And just getting away from those people and then pursuing my own projects, which was a tough transition to make, but it seemed like, I guess I'm saying that wrong. It seemed like it would be tough, but then it didn't turn out to be as tough as I thought it would be. And just learning to market myself online uh, instead of letting older people's opinion in the industry dictate how I think about myself, being confident in marketing myself
yeah.
and going all out and choosing to believe in myself, even though I worked for so many people who say, you're no good, we don't like you, go back to where you came from.
Right.
I got so much of that when I moved out to LA. I don't know why, but I got a lot of that. And
Right.
so I had to
Well, it's
get,
very cliquish and no
yeah.
one's supportive there. It's
Oh,
cutthroat,
yeah.
like you say. Yeah.
It,
But
it's a,
the power of saying no is just a true thing. And that we all have to learn, even though we know this logically, it's hard to do when you're trying to build your career. So I totally get that. I've had to say no to a lot of things that
yeah.
I just get approached with custom pieces and I'm like, I
Mm,
can't do that. That's not my thing. I was on the fence about this current one. And I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. But if at any time you don't like it, you can bail out. I'm cool with
mhm.
that because I this is gonna be outside of my comfort zone. They're like, no, we'd love for you to try. And I said, okay. So
Yeah.
here I am.
And
But part of me is struggling with it and I'm wondering if I should have said no. So to your point, I'm not sure yet. We'll see what the end
yeah.
product looks like. And maybe I learned something new out of all of this. Who knows? But yeah, I think, you really have to listen to your gut. You have to know,
Yeah.
what you're good at so far. I think going way outside of your comfort zone might not be too much of a good idea. I don't know what your thoughts there, but there's catch 22. It could push you into something new that, like we were talking about that magic before and, could bring you into something you've never done before and your career takes off. So I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Well, when you were talking about the thing about saying no, like learning to say no has been a practice for me that I've had to get better at. I remember when I was first starting to say no to stuff, it felt like it was going to be the end of the world if I say no to this. Like, oh, nothing will ever go right again if
Mm,
I say no to this thing. And learning that even if I say no to this thing and it turns out to not be the right decision, it's still going to be okay and it's not the end of the world. And I can say yes and I can say no to stuff in the future. Like it was hard to learn that it was okay to say no and overcoming that fear and and then realizing saying no is actually a life-giving thing. It's better for the client and it's better for me
yes.
if
It is.
um
It's that whole, overgiving,
yes,
putting yourself first, being an enabler, if
yes,
if you say yes to everything, then you are also not doing a service to certain people because you're
exactly.
enabling them, and, that's not good either. They're missing out on learning their own lessons, so
Yes,
it's a hard
exactly.
balance for sure.
Definitely.
Um so what is your favorite creation story to date? Like funny, ambitious, meaningful, music or art? Like do you have anything you want to share?
I mean, being out in nature, going to the mountains or going to the ocean, anytime I do that, it fills me up and I end up thinking of ideas for paintings or ideas for music while I'm out there doing that. And then when I come back to the studio, studio is like an extension of that time out in nature. Um,
That's awesome. Yeah, I
yeah,
call
like
it a nature bath. So
yeah.
I take my
Well,
dog to the park and I get my nature bath
Yeah.
then it helps to all that ails you, really. I think everyone should do it all the time. But my dog gets me out every day into nature, and we have a lake around here, and we have a state park right near me. So we go
Nice.
quite often, every day, at least to the lake. And um, I'm able to sit in peace and quiet and listen to the birds and the trees and the leaves and the water and ducks or whatever's there. And in those moments, things come for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I've really gotten to love going to the ocean in the evening and swimming, and it's
Oh,
icy cold, which I love actually. Um, it's a really special experience to just lay on my back in the ice cold water while the sun's going down, seeing the rays of light coming through the waves. And like there's dolphins all around. There's usually a pod of seals that swim next to me. It's just this
that's
beautiful, colorful, romantic kaleidoscope of color and fun,
yeah,
and
no, that's great. That's
a
awesome.
literal nature bath.
Yeah, for real. I mean, I understand what you're saying because I'm from Florida, so we used to do that all the time,
Mhm.
almost every day with my grandparents. We would go out to the watch the sunset on the west coast of Florida. So
Oh wow.
we would go in the water. So that's a really fond memory of my childhood. But so, what do you like to see in music or creativity in the future? Kind of my last question.
Mhm.
You know, I know I've talked to a lot of people on my channel about community and AI and where how they would like music or art to be, distributed. Like there's all kinds of ways you can go with it. I just want to hear from you, is there anything in particular you would like to see in music or art or creativity in the future?
I'll start with just my own self first, and then a
Yeah,
broader picture
great.
of like art in the world.
Yep.
For my own self, I would love to I would love to be in a more meditative state while I'm creating, with less of a taskmaster sort of beating me over the head, being like, you need to finish this now, and like a more peaceful, relaxed, less worrisome state of creating. Like I remember in college, I majored in pipe organ as my primary instrument, and I remember when I was playing one day, my teacher like grabbed my hand and just to show me, your hand is so tense. How are you even
That's right.
enjoying a thing that you're doing? And he was right. My hand was super tense, and he was like, "You're going to hurt yourself long term if you keep playing like this."
Mhm.
So I had to learn to relax my hands while I play, and he was right. It helps me play faster. It helped me play more musically, more interestingly, and also more right. Even though the tenseness that I was having was because I wanted it to be perfect,
Yeah.
it was actually the act of loosening up
Yeah.
and allowing the music to flow that made it more enjoyable and less hurtful to myself. So if the act of painting could feel more relaxed like that, if the act of composing could feel more relaxed like that, like that's a personal goal for myself that I would
Yeah.
love to get to.
Yes, me too. The
Yeah.
fear the fear
Feel
is
like,
real, and
yeah,
the anxiety and the stress,
yeah,
like, it's always in the background waving its ugly head, but if we could just, if I could surgically remove it, I would.
yeah,
But,
I know.
then all our worries would be gone. Maybe I
Yeah.
could get hypnosis or something, I don't know. But,
Every
uh
artist
I'm
I
in
feel has
agreement
this.
with you. Like, if we can get to that flow state is really what you're talking about. Like, staying
Yeah.
in the flow state is what
Mm,
you're talking about. Being in that space where you can stay in that mindset instead of popping in and out like we have to do in real life. It would be fantastic if we could stay in that flow state.
yeah.
That's when I had that moment of that tipping point with my business in Tampa, and I was like, oh my God, if I could only make this happen, where I get up in the morning, I'm so jazzed about, creating and let's go. In getting into that state where I'm actually excited and happy and not so stressed and so bogged down and thinking about the 20 million other things that I have to do in that day that I'm not going to get done. So um I very much relate with that. I don't know how to get there. If you figure it out, you should write a book.
It's and not just for us in artistic careers too. I
Oh,
think
that's right.
for everyone. I mean, in business circles, I think it's referred to as deep work whenever you're
That's right.
just focused on doing the one thing and not bogged down by a bunch of a cacophony
Yep.
of different voices.
Yes, which are going on all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
I use my notes and my phone for that. I do brain dump every day of all my lists of things. And I have like 20 lists for everything in my life. And I just add to those lists so I don't forget, but it doesn't have to stay there. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I can get rid of that now, and I'll look at that later. And that's how I deal with it simply right now. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's how I do it. Well, it was so amazing to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. And
Yes, thank you, April.
we'll provide Jeff's contact information in the comments if you want to get a hold of him for any reason. But thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Feel free to nominate yourself or someone you know as our next guest. Thank you for being a part of our creative community. Stay inspired and keep shining bright.